Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Steve Bosquet, the opinion editor of the Sun Sentinel, and we have with us today four of the Democratic candidates who are running in Congressional District 20. I'm going to quickly introduce my colleagues. Martin Dykman of the editorial board, Dan Sweeney, who is deputy editorial page editor, and the editor of the Sun Sentinel, Julie Anderson, is here with us as well. We appreciate you taking the time to join us, and we've got a lot of questions to ask, and we want to hear from all of you and have a very robust exchange of views. I think a good place to start is to give each of the four candidates a brief opportunity, say 2 minutes, to make an opening statement and tell us why you're the best candidate in this race. And I thought we would go alphabetically. And so I'm going to begin with you, Sheila Sherfilis McCormick. You have the floor.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Sheila Sherfilis McCormick. I am a daughter of the district. I am a mom, a wife, and I have 2 children. I went to Howard University for undergrad and St. Thomas University for law school and University of Maryland towards my master's in business administration. This has been one of our 3rd times in meeting, and I see a lot of new faces, but I'm excited about the opportunity to speak to everyone. And what really differentiates me from everyone running in this race is not just my passion and determined to move us forward and focus on progress, especially economic progress and social justice, but also the experience I've had for the last 10 years advocating in Congress, writing bills, relationship building, just talking about and how we can implement real change and talking about the implementation that it really is what people thought it would be and what the bills are decided to be. And I've been doing that consistently. In addition to that, I am the only one in the race who actually knows how to wealth build. When I say that, I'm talking about creating jobs, actually putting us on the forefront of federal contract acquisition and ensuring that we really do have an equitable seat at the table when it comes to financial growth, even with vocational school training. But most importantly, this election is important because I'm the only one who really had the political courage to run at a point where our district needed a voice. And it was unpopular for some people, but I knew that it was a time for us to speak up. And that kind of political courage is imperative, especially right now in Congress, when we're looking at how we can recover equitably.
Okay, thank you very much. Elvin Dowling, you have the floor, sir.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And let me just begin my comments by saying that I believe that courage is doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And so I have attempted to live my life that way. I am a resident of Broward County, and I've been a resident of Broward County for the last 10 years. But I was born and raised in Palm Beach County. I grew up on the corner of Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard and Tamarind Avenue. I had the opportunity to serve as chief of staff for the National Urban League in New York City on Wall Street. And in that role as chief of staff for the National Urban League, we connected more than 105 cities across America and worked with more than 2 million families. We connected 436,000 people to good jobs, to economic development opportunities. And so you asked the question, what makes me better than everyone else? And I would say that I think that only the people of the district can determine that. But I will put my experience as a civil rights advocate. I will put my experience up as chairman of the board of one of the largest food banks in Palm Beach County. When COVID hit, we were able to provide more than 20 million pounds of food to 2 million hungry people throughout South Florida. And finally, let me just say that there are more people in this race who have created jobs. As a small business owner, I've created about 100 jobs, good paying jobs. I've always paid more than $15 an hour to the people that work for me. I do that in my campaign, and I will continue in this vein if I get the privilege of serving in Congress.
Okay, thank you very much. Phil Jackson, let's hear from you, sir.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I'm the candidate with the greatest depth of knowledge on the issues affecting the District 20 and the United States in general. having run for U.S. Congress and other positions for a number of years. My initial run was 1986 when I ran against Tom Lewis, and subsequently ran against Marion Lewis on issues related to senior citizen discrimination against senior citizens. I ran against Karen Marcus on labor union issues and had strong support for the labor unions at that time, and nearly unseated her as she was an incumbent. So I now not only have local and state, but I also have national level of experience, having worked on labor, education, and military related issues in Illinois, North Carolina, and the Science Defense and Defense Corridor in Northern Maryland and Washington, D.C. I work with Obama administration cabinet personnel, the Lieutenant Governor and Governor of Maryland, and other military and government officials on base realignment and closure, or BRAC, to develop job and education opportunities for soldiers and their families as they transition from Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, down to Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. I also was involved in developing education opportunities for military personnel transitioning from facilities in Northern Virginia to Fort Bragg and Pope Army Airfield, which is now known as Pentagon South in North Carolina, during the BRAC process. As a United States Navy veteran, as a business owner who have created jobs and have personnel, individuals who are working in the film and television industry across this country in Florida, North Carolina, New York, and California, I know how to create jobs. I know how to run a business. And I've worked in defense, education, and training policy matters in Europe and at various military facilities across the United States, and including the Pentagon. I am the candidate with the greatest depth of knowledge and experience. I worked for presidents. I worked for governors in various parts of this country. I worked on various campaigns. Carol Moseley Braun, when she was seeking to become the Democratic nominee for the Democratic Party, worked on Obama campaign when he was seeking to become the first Black male United States Senator from Illinois. He became the president, 44th president. I then moved to Washington, D.C., and where I worked with his administration in terms of labor issues with Tom Perez. So I am the candidate who has the greatest depth of knowledge, national, state, and local.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And now we'll hear from congressional candidate Emmanuel Morel. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. It is a pleasure to be with you. I asked the folks of District 20 to send me to Washington, D.C., because I'm the one running on a Black agenda. A Black agenda is a poor people's agenda. I asked you to send me to Washington, D.C. for the following reasons. Number one, American democracy is under attack. The American experiment has never been so threatened since the Civil War. I fought day and night to protect this country for 30 years as a federal investigator, and I know how to fight against those who seek to destroy this democracy. I have the goods on Donald Trump. In order to bring America back from the precipice, Donald Trump must be dealt with swiftly and severely. Since Trump is the head of the movement to destroy this experiment, I promise you that as a congressman, I will drag Donald J. Trump into the gates of hell. Once the head is neutralized, the flock will scatter. Everything that we seek to do is secondary until we secure this nation from the reprobates who seek to destroy it. The Black agenda, reparations for slavery, $15 minimum wage, none of this will matter until we bring Donald Trump and his minions, until we put them into jail. Nothing else matters. Americans must understand what we're facing. I have seen this before in third world countries. I saw it in Venezuela. I saw it in Argentina, witnessed it in Chile, America is under attack. This is no joke. We are in trouble until we get Donald Trump and his minions neutralized. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for that. And thanks for those 4 opening statements. We're going to return to all these subjects. It's going to work like this. We're going to take turns. Those of us at the Sun Sentinel will be asking questions on a whole variety of topics. I think for the most part, we will direct a question to a particular candidate. There won't always be time for every candidate to respond to every question, but we're going to do our best to be sure that there's a fair balance of time here. It's a challenge with 4 candidates, but we'll do it. And of course, we want to hear from all of you. And I encourage my colleagues to just raise their hand or whatever, and I'll be acting as a moderator, but we'll get as many questions in as we can. I'd like to begin and ask Ms. Sherpalis McCormick the first question, and that is, it's been a lot of discussion in this campaign about your so-called People's Prosperity Plan, also known as Universal Basic Income. You want to give $1,000 to everyone in the United States. And I have to say that your opponents have, in their questionnaires, were highly critical of it, lots of different reasons. But I'd like to ask you where the idea came from and how, with the deficits rolling the way they're rolling in this country, how are you ever going to pay for it?
Okay, so thank you for the question. And I just want to clarify, our program is not for everyone. Our program is for everyone who is over 18, and it's for people who make less than $75,000. Our program is a program that is for economic stimulus and economic stimulus checks. And if we look at in the past who started economic stimulus checks, it was through a Republican, which was Donald Trump. And the reason why the checks were even given was because it was out of need, not just a desire or a likelihood that I would like it. What we're looking at right now is that we have a potential for a financial crisis. And everybody in Congress, everybody in DC is worried about the same thing. How do we prevent any kind of economic collapse during this pandemic? And that's where the idea started. So as I heard different people putting forth different bills, we put forth our own bill, which is the People's Prosperity Plan, and in which we developed that program. And that bill was written not just by me, but also with law professors, and we all came together and strategized on how we can help the district. And that was the most equitable. If you go on my website, it talks about how we plan on paying for it, specifically the taxes that we want to impose. Now, those taxes are nothing new. These are taxes have been well discussed in Congress. Those are taxes that are going to be utilized regardless. The only difference is that my plan specifically talks about using the money that's generated from those taxes to going directly towards the people. We see that the need for some kind of stimulus, continuous stimulus, is there, and Congress has agreed upon it. And that's how we got the child income tax credit. And that child income tax credit, where you see people now on last Wednesday, they received their 4th check. So if you have 4 kids, you received 1,200 kids because for each child checks, because for each child you have, you receive $300. So what we have going on right now is a UBI, a part of a UBI program. It's not complete UBI because UBI is for everyone and it's forever. This is not that. And in addition to that, I want to point out that we are already having that. That is going on. And they're going to do the child tax credit until 2025. They were proposing it. So we need to have a plan that deals with our district. And our district is 50% over 55 and older. We can't allow to have a representative who's not going to represent the entire district. Economic recovery has to be equitable. A lot of my opponents who criticized it severely is because they have no idea what's going on in Congress. They're not well researched. We have 96 members, Democratic members, who agree with that. And if you look at what's going on today, when we're on the precipice of a global even financial collapse, what's going on in China, what's going on with these different hedge funds who invested in certain companies, this is why everyone in Congress is thinking about how can we prevent that. It's out of necessity.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn next to Elvin Dowling real quick, and just because Mr. Dowling, I think you said in your questionnaire that this looks like an attempt by Ms. Sherpalis McCormick to buy votes in this election. So what's wrong with this idea of the universal basic income?
Oh, nothing's wrong with the idea of a universal basic income. And in fact, I have advocated for a universal basic income. And I've advocated for that universal basic income from the very first day of my campaign. The only difference between Ms. Sherpalis McCormick's plan and mine is steeped in this thing we call math. and this idea of making sure that when your outgo exceeds your income, your upheave isn't your downfall. And let me just say this. If you do the numbers, at $75,000, making $75,000 or less, when you multiply it, we're talking about 100+ million Americans. We're talking about at least $2.1 to $2.3 trillion a year. And when you look at the federal budget, which is only $4.2 trillion a year, that is going to force us to have some serious conversations. Do we get rid of Medicare? Do we get rid of Social Security? Do we get rid of all of these types of benefits that we're talking about? But let me just say one thing as well. It's one thing, and I keep hearing, I wrote this bill. What are we talking about? Like, where is this bill? That's the first question I have. And let me just say this. I received a mailer at home. This is what I got from the distinguished woman. And if you look at it, it almost appears as if these individuals have signed off on her plan. Now, the challenge I have is this. I looked at this list, and one of my friends is on it. And so I picked up and called the honorable gentleman from the great city of Ithaca, New York, Savante Myrick. And I asked him the question, do you agree with this plan? He said, well, I've never heard of the candidate. I've never heard of the plan. And I said, well, tell me more about what you're trying to do. And he said, well, what we're trying to do in the city of Ithaca is what my friend who was the mayor of Stockton, California, attempted to do. We have a very limited plan of 18 months where we're going to provide $300 a month to individuals who have children who are single parents within a specific zip code in our city. Now, that's a pretty prescribed plan, but that's not the impression that is left. And so I will just end my comments by saying that I believe we ought to be straight with people. I believe we ought to tell the truth, shame the devil, let the chips fall where they may. And I don't believe that this plan does it.
I'm going to call on my colleague Dan Sweeney in just a second, but I do want to give Ms. Sherfilis McCormick a brief chance to respond only to this, ma'am. That last comment that Mr. Dowling made, he's saying that you're suggesting, and I've seen this mail piece, you're suggesting that these officials from around the country have supported or endorsed your plan. So have they?
So what I think is imperative that we have to point to, because it's right here, and you can't want to go to Congress, but you lack critical reading skills. It says clearly that there are cities that are implementing programs that will give monthly checks to their constituents. Is that not what his program is doing, sir? So there's something that we have to understand, which is about qualifications. You have to be qualified to understand how to read the law, understand the law, and have critical thinking skills, because you're not displaying that. And that's what I say. A lot of people who are commenting and saying this isn't true, they're not reading. And if you're reading, you understand what it says. And it's important because we can't send people to Congress who will miss it. And I'll give you an example. I want to say this last thing. When I first started running, and as I was working in DC, our Honorable Alcee Hastings put forth an infrastructure bill. And I went in it and I looked at it. I was like, why isn't this hitting the floor? It's a senior person. And we saw that the funding source was incorrect, that funding source was extinct. It no longer existed, right? And so we went back and we're like, hey, you have to fix it. That's what you do as you go to DC and you advocate. So we can't have sloppy people trying to represent the district because they have problems reading.
Okay, Dan Sweeney.
Hey, yeah, I've been to your website, Sheila, and looked at the breakdown of how it's paid for. I understand you're not going to cut anything; you're going to add more in taxing to pay for it. And you have $250 billion from the carbon tax, $300 billion for that wealth tax on the wealthiest people in the country. But the largest percentage is a 10% VAT tax or value-added tax that would generate $1 trillion. The big criticism of VAT tax is that it's a regressive tax. It hurts people who are, don't save or invest. It hurts people that buy more. That is, poorer people. So, aren't you you're saying you're going to give $1,000 to everybody who makes less than $75,000, but aren't you taking more from them in taxes as well?
Not necessarily. That VAT tax is something that we've been looking at out of necessity. It's not taking away from people who spend more, because right now the people don't even have money to spend. The reason why it's so important that we look at why all of these states and why are these programs going on? These programs are going on because people don't have enough to sustain everyday life. So even when we look at one of the cities, I think it was St. Louis, they were given $500 every single month. And what they saw is that people use that to pay for their housing, they paid for electricity, and they paid for their car payments. We're at a dire place. This is not forever. As I stated before, this is an equitable way for us to have relief for everyone and not just a certain group. And that's the reason why the vax tax has been one of the biggest debated issues, but it's out of necessity. I keep pointing that out. It's out of necessity. And we need to do something now to actually help the people. And I want to go back. I'm happy you pointed out, it's misleading and it is lying when you say you have to cut all of this for it to happen. Those are Republican ideologies. That's what Republicans say, and then they go fund a war. That is not true. We all know that not to be true. So we need to, if you want to shame the devil, shame on you for being a pastor spreading lies. Come on now. This is a dire time for our people. Let's be honest and have honest conversations. And if you don't like my proposal, I'm okay with that. But propose something else instead of trying to rely on antics and fear-mongering lies. This is a Democratic district. Let's perform and act like Democrats and have a discussion about our actual positions.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me ask Phil Jackson about the People's Prosperity Plan and what would be your alternative?
Well, my alternative is to make the $300 per child tax credit permanent and to tax the wealthy and 1%, have them pay their fair share, and to get corporations to pay taxes. These are entities that don't pay taxes. I was really surprised when I first began to earn up into the six figures when I was working full time and found that at a certain point, I didn't have to pay Medicare tax. Certain aspect of Social Security tax just basically went away. I said, well, why is that? We really need to put these taxes into the system so that we can help folks. So I would have been willing to pay those taxes. Most of my life, I've earned up into six figures and haven't had to pay that particular tax. So my alternative would be to focus specifically on those who have a need, and we need to make Social Security solvent. Therefore, we need to increase from $1,500 a month the average Social Security benefit to seniors to $2,000 per month. And we can do that by getting the corporations to pay their fair share and getting the top 1% to pay taxes. And those are both sensible measures. The VAT tax is not something that started with Donald Trump. Not the VAT tax, but the UBI is not something that started with Donald Trump. It goes back to Milton Friedman, a libertarian who introduced this plan of $1,000 a month basic income in order to do away with Social Security Act of 1935. The Republicans, the conservatives have been trying to do away with the Social Security Act of 1935 since the 1950s and 60s. And this is their fundamental approach to doing that. They had tried it with a negative tax back in Reagan's presidency, and that I believe, took us into the recession of the early 1980s. And what they ended up doing instead was privatizing everything, deregulating everything, and they ended up creating private prisons that imprison Black and brown people at an astounding rate. So we have to be careful what we're saying. This is not a Democratic plan. It has never been a Democratic plan or a Democratic initiative. What we need to do is focus on in terms of doing stimulus, similar to what our president recently did, but not on creating a universal basic income that will last a year or 2 years. We just can't afford it. As Mr. Dowling just pointed out, we don't bring in enough taxes annually to pay for this kind of thing, to give those between 18 and 65, or those who make less than $75,000 a year, a flat income. We need to be more strategic in terms of how we approach helping people in these neighborhoods.
Okay.
I see someone has a hand up. They want Mr. Sweeney.
I just had a quick point of clarification. When you say you want the wealthy to pay their fair share as far as Social Security, are you talking about doing some sort of a wealth tax and then using that to help pay for Social Security, or are you talking about taking the cap off of payroll taxes, which is currently right around $148,000?
Yeah, they take the cap off the payroll, both of those.
Okay.
Because I was just using it as an example of when I started making over $100,000 or more a year. I found that I didn't have to pay certain aspects of my taxes. And I thought that was a wrong idea. We need to pay our fair share. And you find that most wealthy people don't mind paying their fair share of taxes. It's just that our tax structure needs to be reformed.
Okay, thank you.
Let me turn to my colleague, Martin Dyckman. Martin, go ahead. You're muted.
I have to address this to all four of you because the Ethics in Government Act requires every candidate for Congress to file a financial disclosure form once they've raised or spent more than $5,000. All of you have. None of you have filed that report, that financial disclosure statement. How can we look to you to pass laws when you don't respect the ones that are there? Start with Ms. McCormick.
So presently, we're in the process of pulling our documents together, and we have asked for that extension, and we're waiting on that. But it's a complicated process. It's not a simple one. So as far as respecting the law, I have a history of respecting the law. I've never had any kind of violation, any kind of accusation, any lawsuits. So I have a history of respecting the law, implementing the law, upholding the law. This is just more of an administrative filing in which we're putting those documents together.
May I speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Dowling.
That's Mr. Jackson.
Okay,
Go ahead, Mr. Jackson.
I have filed that report. What I'm finding is that individuals are having difficulty finding the data that I submit because they filed it in the raw data file when you go to the elections office at the federal elections office. I've even the labor unions were not able to find that I was even in the race because they were looking in the wrong place. I called Washington to find out, well, what's going on. They said, well, these people aren't looking in the right place. I filed electronically online, and therefore my files are in a separate location. So if you go and look at the raw data instead of the side of the data that you would normally find filings for candidates, you will find that my report is there.
Are you talking about your campaign finance reports or the one single report that's filed with the House clerk? The financial disclosure statement.
The one that's filed with the House clerk, the financial disclosure statement. I'm not required to file the financial report for the campaign until October 13th. I came in after the last filing day.
You raised more than 5,000, have you not?
Right, and I filed a report indicating that.
It seems to me that the law says it should be filed once you've done that, but we'll check further on that.
Yeah, please check the raw data. That's where it is.
Go ahead,
Probably
Reverend Dowling.
very much on my campaign anyway if you're not looking in the right place. I'm just sharing with you what I learned when I called DC to find out exactly where my filing documents were going. There's a place that they call raw data. You need to look there.
Well, let me just start by saying you don't have to do a search for mine, and with all due respect, your information is a little bit off. And so my financial disclosure statement, which is a required filing with the House clerk, has been filed with the House clerk. And in fact, it is available on my website and has been available on my website for months. And so I want to encourage you to go to dowlingforthepeople.com. At the very top of the menu list is a word that says accountability. And so if you click on accountability, you will see a big old hyperlink that says financial disclosure statement. And so you don't have to go searching for it. Not only did I put my House financial disclosure statement, which is required by the clerk, I also put my FEC filing right there on my website so you can find it. So you don't have to go looking for it. So it's not found somewhere in raw data. You can find it and look for it right there. So I want to encourage you. But let me just say this. I think the last vestige of the desperate is to begin calling names, questioning personal attributes, saying that you can't read and things like that. One of the things I have endeavored to do is to be honest and transparent and forthright, to not call names, I think that it's time out for that kind of politics. And let me just say this. This is not Ms. McCormick's first time running for office. This is not her second time running for Congress. This is her third time running for Congress. And she has not heretofore filed a financial disclosure statement with the House clerk. There's no question about that. This is cycle number 3, not cycle number 2, not cycle number 1. And not only that, but if you look at her FEC filings, you will find at least 9 of 12, 13, at least 9 where it says not filed late, not we're looking for an extension. It says failure to file, 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 9 times. And so I think that if we're going to be honest with the voters, because let's be honest, you guys cover a part of South Florida that is known for politicians not being transparent. And one of the things that I have promised to do is to be transparent with the voters, to lay it all out on the line and let the chips fall where they may. But let's be clear about this. This is not personal attacks, ad hominem attacks. These are things that can be backed up by fact. Don't take my word for it. Look for it for yourself.
Well, Mr. Dowland seemed to have alluded to me when he stated that you shouldn't have to go look for this information in raw data. I'm just letting you know that this is how the federal government makes their file. It's not that I've created that file system. The financial disclosure form was filed with the clerk on time as it should have been. When I went to look for it, I had to contact their office and make sure that the file was there, and they told me how to find it. I would be glad to do what Mr. Dowland has done and pull that over to my website so that all the world can see. That way, no questions can be asked. Thank you.
Okay.
I wanted to mention something also. As far as the times where it says failure to file is because at those moments I wasn't running and there was nothing in the accounts, and that was in between my races. But outside of that, it goes back to the importance of putting out misleading information once again. The leader of people who attack, and I never come in attacking, I never started off, but in every single race, Mr. Dowling, you have called names, you have attacked. And I just want to put this out there. You attacking will not move you higher in the polls. It will not bring you up. It will not make you win. This is about
Ms. Sheriff-List McCormick, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to get back to the fact-based discussion about financial disclosure. You're going to file a financial disclosure sooner or later. So give us an overview. What's it going to show us in terms of the source of your income?
So my source of income, I am married, but then also from my years of savings, my businesses, I've been working consistently. And I did want to bring that up because it was a person from your newspaper who wrote a story that started the whole conversation, alluding to that I had to have gotten this money from PPP, which was never true. Because when we did receive our PPP, that was in March when the pandemic started. We had frontliners working. And in the first month, we paid out every single one. And so our loan that was 1.2 was forgiven. And the following one, we never received that. And so once your newspaper put that in there, which was misleading, in addition to that, I've been in executive capacity. I've been working as a healthcare executive, healthcare regulations expert. I have several degrees. I'm an established woman who's been working for a very long time, for more than 15 years. I'm married to an attorney who settled multi-million-dollar cases. So for the only reason for that to be published is to allude that I live in one of the poorest districts, it was very insulting to me. And it wasn't just me, it was other Black women who felt the same way. I don't sell t-shirts out in the street. I was one of the biggest vaccinators throughout the whole state of Florida, giving more than 1,200 jobs. Why is it that when a Black woman puts her money in the race, it's alluded that it was PPP, but when we have other people put their money in the race, it's not? Why is it that I'm buying an election even though we've been on the ground, walking, talking, doing everything consistently? And these are the things that it really kind of disturbs. And every single Black woman I've spoken to is upset about that. That stereotype of I had to steal it, it has to go. It really does, because I've never been given anything. And we worked very hard to get this position. And all this conversation, it started when you guys put that out. That's when it started. And so now here I am having to defend myself in every situation because of that.
Mr. Morrell, do you want to address to that?
Sir, the buck stops with me. I was under the impression that my financial disclosure statement was filed because it was supposed to have been filed. I will look into it and I will get back to you later today. I can email it to you, which one way or another I will find out what transpired. But I believe that it was done. And if it's not done, I'm going to find out why and get back to you later today, if you don't mind.
We asked all of you about to give a grade for.
May I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
That happened. This past Sunday evening, while I was out campaigning, I got a phone call from a gentleman who identified himself as the father of Sheila Sheffield McCormick. Now, I believe I met the gentleman once, and I was threatened. Okay, so what I did. This is what I did. I have since referred the matter to the FBI. I have put out the phone number from which the call came because I felt threatened, and the individual who was with me told me this is not good. And it was done in both Creole and English. So I met a gentleman in Tamarack who I did when we had a forum, who identified himself to me as Sheila Sheffield McCormick dad. And I introduced myself. He's a Haitian guy. We spoke, and I was very nice to him. He was nice to me. So this call was unprecedented, and it shook me up. And I'm like, this is not something I expect from here. I would expect that from Haiti, but not from here. So I notified the FBI yesterday.
Let me, this is a very serious charge. Mr. Morrell, what was the nature of the threat you're describing?
The threat that I'm describing is the following. The gentleman is asking me why I'm in the race. Why am I in the race? As if I am taking votes away from his daughter. It was very convoluted. To this day, look, I spent the night wondering what was that all about. But it's a good thing that I have the phone number. I have given it to the FBI. They said they're going to look into it. So I don't know. I don't know whether it is her dad, but I will give you the phone number and she can look into it.
Please do, because there's no way. Morrell, I've worked with you before, and the last election in 2022, you were in the race also, and we've never had an issue where anyone called and threatened. We've never ran a campaign, so I would love to know where.
The phone numbers that called me were 954-288-1222. 954-288-1222. It was at 8:24 p.m.
So I just want to make it very clear that afternoon there was a pastors' meeting, and during that meeting, many pastors asked me to speak to you about having a unified front. And I specifically said, and it's on camera, and Channel 5 was there, I said that everyone has a right to run, and what it does is increase our abilities to work harder. So I have never, ever condoned that. And if that was a situation, I would appreciate if you have called me and told me that, because that's something we would have never, ever have done. Ever.
Well, I appreciate you bringing it up here, Mr. Morrell.
Ms. Sheffield McCormick, do you recognize that telephone number?
No, not this one, but it's close to some of the ones that we have for our offices, because we have several numbers. So I'm going to go and check that number. But like I said, there was no one who was ever told to call Morrell. There was no, I mean, I've ran several times before. We never threatened anybody.
Gentlemen, let me put it this way. I'm a former federal investigator. I've investigated the mob, okay? From New York down to South Florida. I've investigated companies. Nothing shakes me up. But that one bothered me because it is as I'm running for office. That's what bothered me. It reminded me of what I've heard about things that have happened in Haiti, not here. That's what troubles me. And that's why I bring it up. And that's why my manager and the other people who were with me that evening said, you need to report this. So that's what I did. I reported it to the FBI. But I want everybody to know, I'm a nice guy. But I have friends in hell. I have friends in heaven. You decide which ones you want to deal with, because I can call upon any one of them. But I do not take threat lightly. and I'm capable of responding. Thank you.
Okay. Let's turn to foreign affairs for a couple of minutes. Mr. Jackson, in your questionnaire to the Sun Sentinel, you very clearly said you oppose any sort of military intervention in Haiti. Correct? And why do you feel that way?
Well, as a veteran of the United States Navy, I served over 30 years. I served this country. And we spent a lot of time, money, resources in Afghanistan. We have just now withdrawn. And it was high time we withdrew. We should have withdrawn upon as soon as we was able to take out Osama bin Laden. We should have started demobilizing at that time. So to start sending troops in situations where humanitarian resources and other assistance would be more apropos is not appropriate. I think we cannot have a military solution. I think I heard the president say this recently, just yesterday in his address to the United Nations. We cannot have a military solution to every problem that we have. We, as one of my esteemed colleagues here once stated, we have to be weary of the military-industrial complex as we were warned by President Eisenhower, General Eisenhower. Those of us who have served know better than anyone the devastation that war can bring. My job as a military medical person was to make sure that our sons and daughters got home to see their families. I have seen the devastation, as my first assignment as an 18-year-old sailor was at the National Naval Medical Center, now known as Walter Reed in Bethesda, Maryland. And I saw the devastation of the Vietnam War. I have seen my troops come back from overseas during the Gulf conflicts, not quite the same people that they were. So as a military man, I understand the devastation of war. I understand how it affects families and children. My job, one of the things I did as a vice president up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where we supported Fort Bragg and the personnel there, was to try to bring psychological training and skills to the families of those soldiers who were coming home after being exposed to 3, 4, 5 different mobilizations. So I don't want to see us continue to use our military when we have the diplomacy, we have the resources, we have the wherewithal to go in and provide additional kinds of support. Help them with the investigation in terms of the death of President Morrissey. Help them with humanitarian support. Help them to rebuild the nation. Help them to create job opportunities for the people there. You know, use the USAID, use other aspects of the State Department to go in and provide support. We don't need to use the military in every situation.
Okay. Dan, you had your hand up there? Yeah.
Yeah, just real quick for clarification, I wanted to point out, I just looked at the House Clerk's website, and Mr. Dowling, Mr. Holness, and Ms. Sharif all have disclosures on file. Mr. Jackson does, though it appears to not actually disclose anything. It's largely blank, and Dr. Siddiqui has applied for an extension. Those are the only things that are on the House Clerk's site currently.
All right, thanks for that clarification, Dan. By the way, I want to back up and just change the discussion just a little bit here and ask Mr. Morell about something you said in your opening statement. You want to, quote, drag Trump into the gates of hell, we heard you say.
That's correct.
How are you going to do that?
Because I have the books on him. I was investigating Donald Trump when I left the agency. Donald Trump was bringing young ladies, young girls from Eastern Europe for his modeling, for the Trump modeling agency. And it's funny how not one person has touched that one, because I sent files to the Democratic Party. I notified them in 2016, in 2020. No one has gotten to me. It bothers me because I know I've investigated some of those young ladies. Donald Trump had stacked them up in Queens, New York, like sardines. And every night he was out with one of them. So Donald Trump was within the crosshairs, within my crosshairs. I was coming after him until a phone call went from Rubio's office to the to the Secretary of Labor, from the Secretary of Labor to the regional administrator in Atlanta, and then to my district director. I was the assistant district director, and I was told to stop the investigation. I refused. This is the first time in 30 years that I had turned down, that I had gone against my superior, but I was ready for the fallout because I knew I had Trump. And they came at me a second time. The answer was no, because I brought my investigators all the way from Naples. I had them stay in a hotel here in West Palm, and we were going after
Mr. Merrill,
him. Yes, sir.
Do you have any emails, documents, anything that can back up anything about this investigation that you did that you could send us?
You'd have to go to the U.S. Department of Labor, Wage and Hour Division, do an FOIA of the files. You would have to do that because let me put it this way: they flew down from Atlanta. This is the beauty of it all. They flew down from Atlanta, came to my office, and said they were transferring me to Atlanta because I refused to stop the investigation. At which time I quit on the spot. I literally walked away from 30 years of experience. I walked away because I refuse to be told that I can go after the small fish and not after the big fish. One thing that I promised when I walked in as a 23-year-old, when I walked into the agency, is that when I leave, I will leave with my head high. I will never bow, and I have never bowed.
All right. Reverend Dowling, am I correct that at a recent candidates forum, you talked in some detail about the extent of political corruption in South Florida?
Correct.
And corruption, I thought I heard you say in Broward County.
Correct.
I'd like you to tell us how that relates to your candidacy and what are you describing?
Well, thank you. I didn't realize this endorsement interview would go so far left. So I'm glad to get back in the conversation. And I hope in the remaining moments I have, you get to learn a little bit more about me and why I want to be a member of Congress. So let me just say that one of the major issues that I have talked about, really three parts: better jobs, safer communities, servant leadership. But when it comes to servant leadership, I believe one of the biggest challenges we have is corruption in South Florida and in our politics. And I'm running to end all of that. And which is why it was important to me, transparency and accountability were important to me, why putting my financial disclosure report on my website so that it was very easily found was important to me, why putting my FEC report on my website was very easily found because it's important to me. You know, I have an issue when we've got elected officials who show up to campaign events when they're supposed to be in Tallahassee doing the people's work. They come on private planes that they can't tell you who owns it. I don't know who owns it. I don't know who's paying for it. I'll get back to you. And the response is always, I'll get back to you. You know, not filing financial reports over and 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 over again. And the response is, I'll get back to you. Or just the very appearance of impropriety. We've got at least one candidate, a county commissioner, who has got hundreds of thousands of dollars in questionable billings to the U.S. government. You know, questionable healthcare billings. There's an issue with that. We got another candidate who is connected to so many PACs, perks, and privileges that regularly break the rules, that regularly skirt the law. These little Broward PACs that they send out, these little mailers, these questionable mailers that they send out, and you guys know about it because you've written about it over and over and over and over again. And then they want to come back and say, we want you to believe me this time. I'm not connected to the foolishness this time. Yeah, my campaign manager is wanted for questioning with PPP fraud. Yeah, my daughter's wanted for questioning with PPP fraud. And yeah, they used my address. And yeah, there's a check with possibly my name on it, but I don't know anything about it. And let's not talk about it. The people deserve better. And I'm willing to do that. And so I've said, I'm not taking your dirty, stinking money. I'm going to people, regular people, talking to them, knocking on doors, because to me, that's important. And let me just say this. Only 3 of us, this is a pay-to-play system. Y'all know this.
Yep.
Everybody knows this. This is a pay-to-play system.
Amen.
And I fought the system. I went to people, and we were able to get on the ballot by talking to people. Now, most of the candidates attempted, and it's a very difficult thing to do. It's very difficult to do. And some candidates just wrote a check because it's pay to play. And you got to take my word for it that this is where my money comes from, despite the fact that I won't file any forms. And that's supposed to be okay. I don't think it's okay. And I think the people deserve better. And I'm fighting against that. And it's a signature piece on my campaign. And let me just say this, and I'm going to stop talking because I ain't had much time. One of the things I have had the challenge with in Broward politics is these Democratic clubs, more often than not, they've already made up their minds on who they're going to support. And so folks like myself and Mr. Jackson and Mr. Morrell, they're not inviting us to their forums. They got a forum tonight, for example, the Democratic President's Council. And they had specific criteria that you were supposed to meet. You were supposed to have more than 100 individual contributions. I did. You're supposed to have more than $25,000 in contributions. I did. You're supposed to loan to your own campaign. I did. I met every single threshold they had, and they still didn't invite me. And when I called them and I asked them about it, the only thing they said was, you've had enough exposure. You've had enough exposure. We're going to go with the top 6. We don't have any qualifying criteria. Same with the Broward Democratic Environmental Caucus. You've had enough exposure. I'm running because people deserve better than that, and they deserve an opportunity to hear from all of us, however long it takes. They deserve that. And shame on these folks for locking out qualified candidates. Hell, some of us are more qualified than others. And yet here we are.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jackson, this Democratic President's Council forum tonight, are you invited?
Yes, I am invited. And I'm surprised I'm invited because, I stand with Mr. Dowling on this one. There are a number of them I have not been invited to. I showed up at one just the other night and they were surprised to see me. I got an invitation. I found out by accident that there's another group that's having one coming up on Thursday. And I just happened to get from a personal friend of mine this information. I called the person who was organizing and she was quite surprised to find that I got her cell number and was able to call her, and I made sure that I got to invited to that one as well. So there's a lot of things that's happening. I even was not invited to the Certified Teachers Association interview, and I'm a union member. I'm a member of the United Faculty of Florida, Florida Education Association as a dues paying member, and somehow they were able to cut me out of that one. But they came here to Palm Beach County and tried to get the union up here to go along with that mess, and they gave them the permission to pound pavement. In other words, we're not buying that up here in Palm Beach County in our unions. So there you have it. But I'm able to force my way into these meetings. I'm able to show up and find out and get there. And when I show up, they don't have a choice but to put me on. And that's how I ended up in the meeting the other night at the Black Caucus.
Okay. Dan, did you have your hand raised?
I was not invited. I did receive a notice about it, but because I know them, most of those groups, like Mr. Dowling said, they've already made up their minds. I'm just not interested in that kind of foolishness. You know what? If you want a congressional race, we'll have a race. But at the end of the day, I think the people will make the decision.
Go ahead, Martin. Yeah.
Mr. Morrell, I think I heard you suggest that former President Trump was trafficking young women from Eastern Europe.
That is correct.
And that you resigned rather than allow yourself to be moved out of your office.
Right.
Did you at any time go to the FBI or about this or to the other news media?
No, sir. I was not entitled to do that. I could always. I had to go up the chain of commands, the district director, and then the regional office. No.
Did you file a whistleblower complaint about being silenced?
No, no. Listen, I was so tired of being jerked around by the agency. You reached a point because I was pacing the floor at night. And at the end of the day, I just say, you know what, heck with it, I'm out. And I left and I kept asking everybody to FOI the file, but it's been it's been 12, this was in 2010, 2011. I kept saying that folks should FOI the file. So whether they're still there, I don't know. But I walked away, like I said, with my head held high, and I'm happy with the decision I've made. But yes, Donald Trump was a human trafficker. Yes, and the biggest human trafficking case that I broke, because I was a member of President Obama's Commission on Human Trafficking, by the way, and the biggest one that I broke was the one in Atlanta, in Georgia, where they were bringing the women from China through San Francisco. Remember, I was in charge of investigating those people, and we would set them up. I'd have investigators taking the place for 2-3 months, and we knew who was going in, who was coming out. But we did break that one down. People went to jail, so at least we did a good thing. But am I happy the way it ended? No, I'm not happy. It left a bad taste in my mouth. And
Okay.
if I may say, I don't remember which one of you, but I don't think it was one of you back in 2013 when I said that I was fighting for student loan debts, for forgiveness of student loans. Someone at the Sun Sentinel said I was offering people pie in the sky. Well, it turns out that pie in the sky is exactly what everybody's talking about now. And now I'm offering another pie in the sky, which is reparations for slavery. And I'll be damned if I'm not going to go to my grave fighting for it.
Mr. Dowling, Reverend Dowling, you've served as a congressional staff member.
Yes, sir.
And my question to you is, I think from out here in the real world, far from Capitol Hill, I think it looks to many Americans that it is impossible to get anything done in Congress. Almost impossible. And so
Almost.
So I was going to ask you, from your experience as a congressional staffer, what you learned about how to get something accomplished and move the ball down the field.
Well, thank you for that. I've had a wide variety of experiences, if you will. One of the first things I did was serve in county government, working for the first African-American county commissioner for Palm Beach County, a lady by the name of Maud Ford Lee, who was the first Black chairman of the board of Palm Beach County. And I was the youngest staff person in county history at the time to work at the level that I was working at. And then I left there and became chief of staff for an organization called Alpha Phi Alpha, and helped to build the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in between the Lincoln and Jefferson Memorial, $110 million project, and also served as chief of staff for the National Urban League, which is one of our nation's oldest civil rights organizations. But yes, I did work with Congressman Hastings on Capitol Hill. And I would say that probably the most important thing that a member of Congress should do is to understand constituent services and to always provide constituent services. And so that's what I want to do. And that's what sets me apart. I'm going to make sure that we answer your call when you're calling about your Social Security check, or you're having a challenge with another federal agency, that we answer those calls, that I show up at the local city council meetings, whether it's in West Palm Beach talking about homelessness or in Fort Lauderdale talking about homelessness, for example, showing up at the local level. But one of the things that I will say that I have done and I'm proud of, when I was chief of staff at the National Urban League, there was an opportunity when President George W. Bush was president to get money in the hands of African Americans to have a down payment to purchase their first home. They had talks with the Congressional Black Caucus. This was in about 2003. The talks broke down, and they wanted to make sure that there was a voice representing the issues and concerns of Black people at the table. And so they called the National Urban League. And I sat down with the House Republican Caucus, and we crafted out what became known as the American Dream Down Payment Act. And it provided tens of thousands of people with the down payment assistance they needed. Now, here I am, a Democrat, an African American, working with white male Republicans, and we put all of that aside to figure out what was best for people. And so I will say that if I'm given the opportunity to serve, because this will not be my first time working on Capitol Hill, and there's also a lot been said about, I wrote this bill and I did this and I did that, so that we're clear, the only person that can submit a bill to the House is a member of the House. So that we're clear about that. So when someone says I wrote a bill and we got this, unless it came through a member of the House, you can't submit a bill and it goes to committee and gets passed and goes to the Senate and then gets signed by the president. So,
okay, a very quick follow-up, and I'll give you a chance there, Ms. Scherfels-McCormick. But very quickly, Reverend Dowling, you said on your biography that you raised more than $2 million, I think, for youth mentoring programs for an entity called Global Image Consulting. Who did you raise that money from?
Well, Global Image Consulting is the name of the business that I developed after I left being chief of staff for the National Urban League. So about 2009, I just decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I wanted to write books. And so I wrote a book with Congressman Hastings about a year ago, that won the Florida Book Award and is now housed in the Florida Governor's Mansion, same governor I sued because he won't do right by voting rights. But I wrote those grants on behalf of two organizations, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity and 100 Black Men of America. And what were we able to do? We were able to convince the Department of Justice to invest $2 million to mentor at-risk, high-risk kids in 69 cities across this country. And it went to benefit those two organizations and about 3,000 kids across America.
Okay, Ms. Scherfels-McCormick, do you want to respond to anything that Reverend Dowling just said?
Yes, let's talk about bills and experience in Congress. Anybody who had any kind of real integral experience in Congress understands that bills are written, majority of the bills are written by advocacy groups, lobbyists, and other interest groups who write the bills and submit it to different members, and those members adopt it and submit it. And so even if we look at the hearings that are made, even if you look at how the Affordable Health Care Act was put together, there are multiple hearings, multiple people who are commenting, who are writing. There are multiple groups. When I was with the National Home Care Association and Hospice Association, we put forth several bills in which we talked about we need to increase funding for HHAs, CNAs. Though it was us who crafted. And that's been part of the problem that I've seen in Congress. You have a lot of people who are sitting there who are members who don't really understand what they're taking on in submitting. So the crafting of it, the sausage, how it's made, it's made by people like you and me. These are the people who write it and submit it. And if you had that kind of integral experience, you would have known that's how it happens.
Let me just ask.
It's made by people like her. And as a result, that's why we have what we have.
I want to ask you, Sheila, Reverend Dowling's experience both as a staffer for Alcee Hastings and as chief of staff of the Urban League, doesn't that give him a perspective in terms of how Congress operates that some of the other candidates in this race don't have?
It would give him one, but you can tell that it lacks because he didn't articulate that. He would understand there's misstatements that are being made by people who don't have experience. I'm sure that you have experience and you've seen it and you know the process. So to say that a bill isn't made, there are a lot of different aides. I talk to aides all the time, and there's certain aides who we have meetings with. There's certain aides who are giving briefs, and there's chiefs of staff. And so we know the difference. So when someone makes statements like bills, this doesn't happen, then it just shows the indication that handmade policy, crafting it, you're not as close to it as you're trying to perceive. And that has to be stated. And that's why I wanted to articulate that the bills that we've been writing in the district, this is what we've been pushing going forward. So I just want to have some transparency and honesty in the conversation of what has been touched and what's been working on. I do believe that he has his own opinion and a certain view, but you can see the lack of realistically having hands on it. You don't know it.
Just so that we all understand this, I actually am a political science professor. I have taught students who have worked for various legislators here in the state of Florida. I have taught students who go for my classes using the fundamental knowledge that I give them on how a bill becomes law and all of that, and work for Congressman Tom Lewis, have worked for other congressmen in the United States Congress. So there's no one person in this group who has an advantage when it comes to how a bill becomes law and how to write a structured bill. I teach that stuff. Thank you.
I want to comment. That's not true. It's an art. When we're writing bills, it's a legal thing. You have to understand appropriations. You have to understand how to get funding. It's like playing chess. It's a very structured and a long process.
And I understand all of that. That's my point.
No, don't cut me off.
One at a time, please.
Don't cut me off. Don't cut me off. The process, especially when you're getting input from other staffers, from Republicans, when you're making relationships with people and you have to go talk to a Republican staffer, a congressman, that is a very tedious. That's why a lot of things don't move. So it's not as easy. And you say who has an advantage? I've done it for more than 10 years.
I want to ask Mr. Jackson.
I worked in Washington for over 7 years. I understand the process too. Don't pretend like you're the only one here.
You're not. You didn't go to law school. You don't understand it. Stop it.
I was pre-law. I was pre-law. Instead of going to law school, I accepted a degree. I accepted a scholarship to pursue my political science degree. So I understand the law. I understand the process. I understand how to do it. I understand all that.
Your degree is equivalent to a law degree specializing in healthcare regulation for the human policy and
you don't need a law degree to know how to write a bill and make a.
You don't and have the appropriations.
You do not need a law degree, and I think that's part of our problem. We have too many lawyers up there in Washington D.C. We need some people who have fundamental knowledge and have worked with people on the streets, like me.
Which are all the things that I have, and I don't want to get into an argument, but I just don't want to discount the truth of what it takes and the hard work.
To discount what I was saying. I just said you're not the only one. Mr. Dowland's not the only one who understands how the processes in D.C. I lived and worked in D.C. for 7 years.
Mr. Jackson, I want to ask you a question, please. This is a question about Alcee Hastings and about how you conduct yourself on Capitol Hill. This is a moment that happened a couple of years ago that maybe a little bit longer than that. I know Reverend Dowling will remember it. There was a congressional hearing. It was about, I think the subject was Medicaid expansion or the Affordable Care Act. And Alcee Hastings sort of went off on a Medicaid official from the state of Texas and talked about how Texas is a crazy state. And I see Reverend Dowling nodding his head. It was entertaining, but it was also highly contentious. It got ugly, frankly. And so I'm asking, would the people in this district have been represented for a very long time by Alcee Hastings, and they know him very well. What do you think about that style of question and answering where we all know Alcee Hastings? He could be a very contentious, confrontational guy, and he said Texas is a crazy state. What do you think of that approach?
Well, I know Al. I know him well. I marched with Al when we were marching against gun violence in the city of Riviera Beach. I knew Al and worked with him prior to him becoming a congressman. Al and I have had knockdown, fuss out confrontations where, he fussed me out on one side and I fussed him out on the other side. And at the end of the day, we dust each other off and we got up and worked together on the things that are important to our district. That was his style. That is not my style. My style is a style of collaboration. I don't want to be party to anybody's zero-sum game. I look for common interests. There are more than 150 things that Republicans and Democrats across this nation and in Congress can agree upon. And I will be looking for those people across the aisle who will be willing to work with me on those things that we agree upon, such as Medicare for all, increasing and making solvent Social Security benefits, and those kinds of things. I believe that politics is the art of compromise, and I understand that, and I know how to make that happen.
Sorry, Mr. Jackson, did you just say that you will find colleagues across the aisle on the Republican side who believe in Medicare for all?
Yeah, well, the research that I've done, and we've done studies, and we've looked at individuals across party lines and where they stand on these issues, and they do agree that we should have Medicare for all. Maybe not the leadership. This is why you have to find individuals within the party who are willing to work with you.
Mr. Morell, go ahead.
Since I seek to represent one of the poorest districts in the country, I can say that the electorate, the voters of this district, are like shareholders diluted in their power and secondary to those who own a large number of shares. Black folks in this district can have any one of us as their representatives, as long as these superficial ideas keep coming up as if they're going to make a difference in their lives. They're not. Nothing's going to change. We have to admit that simply having Black representation has not helped, has not moved the needle. That's why we need reparations. Black people, descendants of African American slaves, need reparations. They need their checks. 300 years of freaking free labor need to be paid. We're not talking about individual culpability. We're talking about institutional culpability. Until America pays that to lift Black folks to a level where they can smile and be happy, nothing's going to change. You can have whomever. RC was there for 28 years. The Glades remain the same way. As a matter of fact, I can say they've receded. Black people, for the most part, our Black communities have receded. We have not gone forward. That's the bottom line. So all these things people talk about, look, I can talk about them all day. I can analyze them. But until we have checks going to Black folks whose forefathers could not leave them a financial legacy, we're just fooling ourselves.
Go ahead, Reverend Dowling.
When I said Medicare
Yes.
for, I think my intent was to say
I
Medicaid.
think you called on me, Mr. Jackson.
Public
Mr.
option for
Jackson.
health, Mr. Sweeney.
Mr.
Public
Jackson.
option for health care is agreed by both sides, both Democrat and Republican. Not necessarily Medicare itself, Medicaid, or some public option for health care. Just to be clear.
Okay, I did call on Reverend Dowling to respond.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify something.
That's okay. Yep, go ahead. Go ahead, Reverend Dowling.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bosquet. Let me just say that I believe that the person that represents the 20th Congressional District needs to be someone that understands the heart of the district. I do. I grew up on the corner of Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard and Tamarind Avenue in West Palm Beach. When you looked out my front door, you saw Church's Fried Chicken. When you looked out the back door, you saw the Coleman Funeral Home. Imagine that. I served as chairman of the board of one of the largest food banks in South Florida. When COVID hit, I went to the mayors of Riviera Beach, West Palm Beach, Belglade, South Bay, Pahokee, and said, how can we help? They said, we need food. They said, government failed us and we need some help. And so we started food distributions that have been going on for 16 months. And so I believe this district needs somebody who's actually going to deliver for them, who has demonstrated a capacity to get things done. Now, the difference between them and me is they show up with cameras. I show up with trucks. And I've been showing up in places where nobody cares about. Let's be clear about that. Until election time, nobody cares about the people in the Glades. Nobody's talking about helping the people in the Glades, but I've been there week after week after week after week after week after week after week. I've been there for young Black boys because my brothers were murdered on the streets of Palm Beach County in the 1990s, and I could be bitter or I could be better. I won the Florida Book Award, for Christ's sake. My book is published, is now permanently memorialized in the Florida governor's mansion. I sued the governor of Florida because he wouldn't stand up and allow people in District 20 to vote. I sued him in federal court for this special election. I was the first person in the state of Florida to sue him when he issued his no mask mandate for schools. I was the first parent in the state to sue him. So when it comes to what kind of representative you're going to be, that's going to be the representative I'm going to be. I'm going to stand up for voting rights. I'm going to stand up for marginalized people. I'm going to keep fighting until hell freezes over, then I'll fight on the ice.
What about, very briefly, what about the point that Mr. Morell made about we need reparations? What's your opinion about that?
Well, he's right. We do. But I'm not, let me be clear, I am not holding my breath waiting on a bill to pass for reparations. Will I support it? Absolutely. Would I champion it? Absolutely. Do I expect it to pass? I don't know. America has a checkered history. I wrote a 535-page tome that was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. It won 6 international awards. Now, I've had my intelligence questioned here. Just this year alone, I've won 6 international awards. This award, that award, you name it. I offer 90 policy prescriptions that you can do not next week, not next year, but that you can do in your level right now to help make the lives of African-American men better. I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. I've researched this work. I understand the policy. I promoted those policies. That's what I want to do in Congress.
Well, just in case some folk have forgotten, I have been running on issues related to the Glades, related to senior citizens, related to poor people, related to the homeless since 1986. All you have to do is check the newspaper reports in the Sun Sentinel, in the Palm Beach Post, the Miami Herald. You will find that Phil Jackson has been out there for a long, long time. I'm not new to this business. And I fought for the same issues when I was in Illinois. I fought for the same issues. I marched with Julian Bond to bring justice to those who were shot down and killed in the streets of Greensboro, North Carolina, which became known as the Greensboro Massacre. As an organizer under the NAACP college, the campus organization of NAACP at North Carolina Central, I've been out here for a long, long time. Most folk don't remember me, but I have been here and I have been steadfast in my support for this community since 1986 when I moved here as a college student, taking on a position as a political science professor in sociology at Palm Beach Community College, then Palm Beach Junior College. I've been in this fight for a long time. I marched with Jesse Jackson. I've marched with L.C. Hastings. I stood with Julian Bond to find justice for those people who were shot down in the Greensboro Massacre. I've been for my community. I've been in this community, and I support all people. It's not just about black and brown. It's about supporting the district. The district that I was running in up in the northern part of the county, I think I must have been one of 6 people who lived in Palm Beach Gardens at that time. That didn't stop me from running because I think people, when they have the right heart, when they have the right mindset, they will support you. And they did support me to the extent that I nearly unseated an incumbent. So I just want to make sure that people know that I'm no newcomer to this. And I've been fighting for the rights of homeless people, senior citizens, people of different gender and orientations since 1986 when I moved to this county.
May I?
Okay, all right. I want to ask Ms. Sherfilis McCormick a question.
Yes, please
Yes.
go ahead.
The other candidates have been speaking about their biographical backgrounds and things they've done on the ground with their hands, with their minds, to improve the lives of real people in this district. So tell us, what's the most important thing that voters need to know about you, not politically, but what you've done as a citizen of Florida and a citizen of the United States to help improve other people's lives?
So, I mean, outside of us creating jobs, we created over 1,200 jobs during the vaccine. When the vaccine first hit, we were the first people who were delivering meals to seniors within their house. By the end of the pandemic, or closer towards when vaccines were available, we fed over 5,000 seniors and people in their homes. We had drive-throughs where you can come and pick up hot foods. When we did that, we participated with small businesses that were struggling at the time. So we contracted with them, where we bought plates of food so we could stimulate their business, and we handed it out to churches. We did this throughout the whole district. We handed out more than 5,000. In addition to that, when we were giving out jobs, because of the situation in Belgrade, we literally had 2 busfuls of people living in Belgrade who we bused to work on our vaccination sites in Miami, just because we could not get vaccination sites in Palm Beach and in Broward County. In addition to that, when President Joe Biden's minority vaccination program came out, the governor would not impose it or actually follow the rules with that. He was not employing minorities to give the vaccination, to do the vaccination education. We fought the governor, we won that, and we were able to bring on multiple companies, and we were able to hire people in that capacity. In addition to that, we were even able to join a partnership with the Florida State. It's the Minority Health and Health Equality, where we partnered with them and we gave out over 100,000 masks. I mean, there's just so many things that we've been doing. I've been the leadership director for the Haitian Chamber when there were Haitian businesses that didn't know how to get PPP, how to get the loan, or even how to make sure that it turns into a grant. You know, we stepped in the grant, we stepped in the sled.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up question. And I'm going to ask you about something I heard Mr. Morell say a few minutes ago, if I heard him correctly. He said the following. He said that the quality of life for many Black residents of the 20th Congressional District has receded. It's gotten worse.
Yes.
And I heard him say that under Alcee Hastings' long record of service as a member of Congress, that basically it has not improved people's quality of life to have Black representation in Washington. What, Mr. Morell, did I accurately describe what you said, sir?
You are correct, sir.
Ms. Sherfilis McCormick, what do you think of his statements? You agree or disagree?
I totally disagree. What we have to understand is that before Alcee was even in Congress, it was much worse. Alcee was affected for a time period. The reason why I even ran against him and challenged him is because we saw that in a 10-year period, he wasn't passing any bills. He wasn't as effective. Remember, we're talking about a senior member who couldn't have his bills even hit the ground. They wouldn't hit the floor. And he was actually, everybody else who was there for that amount of time could have. So the reason why I ran was because I saw the diminishing ineffectiveness, and I knew we had to step in and do something quickly. In addition to that, the reason why our district has been suffering so much and receding, it's because we haven't been electing people who have a proven experience of actually growth, economic growth. We haven't been electing people who have done it. And some of the officials, when they get to these elected positions, that's when you see them actually enjoy economic growth, but that's on the back.
Okay, we lost your audio, Sheila.
No?
I think it's back. Yep.
Okay.
Oh.
So if we were focusing on electing people who have a proven track record of economic growth, of contract acquisition, who have a proven record of growing our economy and prioritizing economics, then we would have seen a change in our district. Because I can tell you with 110% that when it comes to federal contracts and competition, our district is not competitive. I've worked with other members of Congress's offices, and they're very organized on how they write a bill. The education comes down. They prepare their constituents to acquire those. There's more education when it comes to that. And I've only seen a few members. Go ahead.
Congress, as you all know, I'm preaching to the choir. Congress is built almost completely on a system of seniority. I'll get to you in a minute, Reverend Dowling. I will. Congress is built on seniority. And Alcee Hastings accrued a lot of seniority in Congress, but you're telling us that for at least the last decade or so, it was for naught. It didn't have any positive impact, right?
Well, I'm not saying it didn't have any positive impact, but what we notice happening is that you could be a senior, but if your bills have flaws in them, they won't even hit the floor. In addition to that, the idea of seniority in the automatic or the effective rate, that's been challenged. And that's really why you saw a new group of people running. We find that newer members are able to pass bills, get them moving, just because they're challenging and they're pushing the trajectory. So what we're looking at right now is just not an issue of seniority. That's why if you look at the country, they've been electing new members for these reasons. And everything that I'm saying is fact. That's why I ran. I saw how many bills were being passed, and I saw what the need was.
Okay, we're getting short on time, and I said to Reverend Dowling, I let him weigh in on this question. Go ahead, sir.
So let me just say that Alcee Hastings was like a father to me. I absolutely adored him. And I felt and feel his loss personally to this day. And, it's sort of difficult when I hear Ms. McCormick say, Alcee couldn't do what everyone else could. Now, that's a quote. And so it's challenging to sort of process that, because I knew a man who did everything he could for as long as he could to impact as many people as he could, so help him God. And so let me just say that I will do everything I can to continue and build on that legacy. I will work to reach across the aisle to help people and to lift people up. I've been in that office. I understand the needs of the district. I have lived in West Palm Beach, and now I live in Broward, and I've served the Glades. And so I want to do everything I can to help make the lives of people better.
I want to ask you a quick question, Mr. Dowling, and we'll pull the census data and so forth. But to the essential contention by Mr. Morell and to some degree by Ms. Phyllis McCormick, the quality of life for many residents of the 20th district has gotten worse, not better. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. In many ways, that's absolutely true. And so a lot of the people who are saying you should promote me because you did a forum either before this or you're going to do one afterward with all the elected officials. And so you got to ask yourself the question, who was in office? When you add up the number of years that Senator Thurston and Representative Dubose and the couple of months that Representative Hardy's been in, and all the years that Holness and Sharif have been in, you've got like 70, 80 years of service. And so what I would ask you is, if your life has been better over the course of the last 70 or 80 years and you live in this district, then you should vote for them. But if you look at the district and you realize that the homeless problem is getting worse, not better, the food insecurity problem is getting worse, not better, all of these life challenges are getting worse, not better, and the people who have been presiding at the top are saying, you know what, I've done such a bang-up job, you should send me up to Washington, D.C. I don't think so. If we always do what we've always done, we're going to always get what we've always got. And doing the same thing over and over again is crazy.
A quick question. I mean, if things are regressing and getting worse, the one person who has been a constant in this community's political life for the longest period of time is, rest his soul, the late Alcee Hastings. How much responsibility does he bear for these problems?
Alcee Hastings served as the dean of the Florida delegation, and he was the member of Congress that represented this area well. But at the end of the day, we still have black snow that's raining down on Belle Glade, and we still have health disparities that's impacting those folks out there because of the challenges of various practices that are going on. We still have endemic poverty. And so there's only so much one person can do, but I do believe that one person can do something. And so we ought to look to see, out of this sea of candidates that we have, who has actually been able to do something to impact the real lives of real people in a real way, that's going to touch them in a real way, that can demonstrate that I have done this. We can meet this need. And that's who I think we should select.
Mr. Morell, all I can see is the palm of your hand over your face. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to respond as the others have. Go ahead.
What I heard, I mean, these are people that I respect, each and every one of them. I hear Mrs. McCormick talking with both sides. She doesn't know which side of her mouth to talk out of. And then I hear the other gentleman trying to have it both ways. If Alcee was there for 28 years, the place has regressed. He's responsible. And that's what we have to have, the courage to say what must be said, not only to white folks, but to black folks. We know that Alcee was taking big bags of money from the sugar industry. So Alcee could not fight the sugar industry while he's taking money from them. So that's we have to say it, but we don't. And this is why people have given up on politicians. I have given up on politicians because I have traveled this land. I listen to Democrats, I listen to Republicans, and I find all of them are saying nothing, absolutely nothing. You have to get to the bottom. You have to go to the genesis of the problem at all times. Go, what exactly is the problem? In 1983, I went to Belle Glade to do some investigations. I go to Belle Glade today, it's the same Belle Glade that I visited in 1983. Kids are still sleeping and cockroaches are still getting into their ears. I mean, the place is dilapidated. What every black community, we have to be strong in our resolve that we need change. But the change cannot be superficial. The change has to be freaking real in people's lives. We have to be able to say, okay, this is what's needed. Most of those people would have had great lives had they been given their 40 acres and a mule, which they never got.
Okay. Thank you for that statement.
Make a very quick comment. I think the fundamental problem is there's too much money in our politics. It's driven by money. most of the candidates, particularly those who are in elected offices, have basically been bought and paid for. And as a result, they have chosen to abandon us. I had a state representative who was elected in November and turned around. Now he's in this race. I don't get it. You have to be loyal to the community that elects you. And it's all about the money. And I think we need to pass the For the People Act and make sure we get these big corporations out and their big spending out of our election, because it fundamentally undermines a one person, one vote principle.
I am the only one in this campaign who has pledged to donate 50% of the congressional salary to nonprofit organizations in the district. I am the only one who took money out of his own pocket to start an organization in Lake Worth to provide for kids out of my own pocket. Look, we Black folks need to step up. You have money, get money out of your own pockets and help people. You keep waiting for the government to do it. It's not going to happen. We have to be the ones to start it.
Okay, Martin Dyckman, question. My colleague Martin Dyckman has the floor. Go ahead, Martin.
Since the subject of sugar came up, sugar industry is cosseted in this country by quotas and supports that essentially exclude foreign competition and pretty much guarantee a profit to the sugar industry and keep prices high for a lot of products containing sugar as well as the sugar itself. What do you intend to do about those? Each candidate, short answer.
May I?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
I think the subsidies need to end because we can't have it both ways. The subsidies need to come to an end.
Go ahead, Sheila. Go ahead.
I have to leave.
Wait a minute, please. One at a time. One at a time, please. Sheila has the floor.
Thank you. I have to leave, but I wanted to answer that question before I leave. I tried to stay on as long as I can. Sure. And so what we have to do is we have to put the people before industries. And that is important. The subsidies that are given, how we're looking at how it's going forward, the people need to put forth, especially when we have businesses within our district who people rely on. It has to be understanding that we're putting people first. I have to leave and I wanted to stay as long as I can, but I got to my destination and I have to get out the car now. But thank you so much for allowing me to stay on. I stayed on much longer than I could have, but thank you so much for this opportunity.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for giving as much time as you could. Appreciate it.
Yep. I've lost track here a little bit. Let's go. Reverend Dowling, please address the question my colleague Martin Dyckman asked about sugar subsidies.
I believe that we ought to hold all corporations accountable, to include Big Sugar. I think we ought to end subsidies for sugar. I think we ought to end subsidies for oil. If they're not giving back to the community, then and to be clear, in some ways, sugar is. They got a lot of money they're putting into local organizations within the Glades. And the challenge is when you put a lot of money into local organizations, sometimes people get a little quiet on the issues that matter most. And so I just want it to be known that Elvin Dowling is too big. I repeat, Elvin Dowling is too big to fit in anybody's pockets. And that includes Big Sugar. And so I am going to insist that they be held to the letter of the law. I am going to insist that we certainly have the federal funding we need to do research to see if there is a causal link between the sugarcane burning practices and the health disparities that are in this district. And I want to make sure that the EPA comes in and the federal government comes in with all deliberate speed to make sure that environmental laws are being upheld. And if they aren't, we ought to hold everybody responsible to the highest extent of the law. That's what I believe, and I will represent people and their interests.
Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, having grown up in a farm community, having worked on farms, my grandfather farmed, so I understand the needs of both farmers and the workers on those farms. I'm not opposed to subsidies for farmers. We feed the world, and we can feed this country with no problem. And I have no problem ensuring that the farmers have what they need in order to do that. I do have a problem with them turning around and spending this money on elections and other activities that seem to elect those people who they like to see elected. That I have a problem with. But in terms of subsidies for farmers and ensuring that we remain strong and the breadbasket of the world, I support farmers. I support the workers. I support the communities. And that's why I have a big problem with the fact that we had for 8 years a monitoring system that was not functioning properly, which was designed to assess the quality of air in that area. I have a problem with that, especially when the grant money is there to pay for such a system, to pay for a monitoring system. We need to get those monitoring systems up and running and installed as soon as possible. We need to have the Palm Beach County Healthcare District take care of doing an evaluation consistent with the EPA standards to make sure that we get the proper report and understand what's going on. I agree with those congressmen and senators outside of our state, outside of our district, who have called on an investigation. There should be an investigation, and we should find out what the fundamental problems are and fix them.
Okay. Dan or Martin, if you don't have another question, I want to maybe move to closing statements by these candidates. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah. I think we've taken up enough of all of our time, but I appreciate all of it.
Okay, great. Sounds good. And let's do this just to be ecumenical and go in reverse order with closing statements. I'm going to ask each candidate to give sort of a final summation statement of why you feel you're the best candidate for this in this race. And we're going to go in reverse alphabetical order. And so I'm going to start with Mr. Morrell. Mr. Morrell, you have the floor.
I want to say thank you for having me, for having us. Thank you for allowing us to show some of what's inside of us. And hopefully you can find a way to see what's in our hearts, how we wish to govern. But this is what I've been saying throughout this race. As the government of the United States reneged on its promise to award the victims of the kidnapping from Africa 40 acres and a mule, by an act of Congress, it was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and Midwest, meaning that it was willing to set up an economic floor for the newly arrived white folks from Europe. That we want our check. Our so-called Black leaders don't know the difference between a symbolic piece of legislation and a substantive piece of legislation. And that is why they want a party, a parade, and a plaque for supporting a symbolic holiday or a street name change. I ask the people of this district to follow me because I have a plan to make our lives better, to make our pockets fatter, and make our minds clearer. We need leaders that are perfect for us, not the ones that white society dictates that we should have. Issues affecting this district, poverty and corruption, are very serious. I can help end both of them. The corruption is so rampant that South Florida is known as the armpit of the country. I thank you so very much for having me. EmmanuelGMorrell.com.
All right, thank you. Phil Jackson.
Yes, as I stated early on, I'm the only candidate in this race who has a deep understanding of national defense, who has worked across the country for the Democratic Party in Illinois, in Maryland, and DC, in North Carolina, worked with base realignment and closing, so I understand the military establishment and what their needs are. Worked in Europe, so I understand foreign policy issues related to this country and our relationship with other nations around the world. And I'm also the only candidate in this race who has a 64% approval rating, according to the studies that we've done. And I've identified the 5 issues that are most important to this district, and they are public safety, that is criminal justice reform, child COVID-19 recovery. In fact, that's number 1, forgiveness of debt. And I have been advocating from the start, $50,000 of forgiveness of debt, and I will work with Schumer, Representative Presley, and Representative Warner, once I get to Congress, to make sure that we move that forward. Not only $50,000, but perhaps all the student debt, if that is possible. Affordable health care is the 4th issue that the people of this district have identified. And finally, increase Social Security. And I've been advocating to increase the average Social Security from $1,500 to $2,000 for senior citizens. And that in and of itself is a stimulus. the $300 per child tax credit, making that permanent, is a stimulus. We don't need a UBI. The UBI requires that we give up something. And I would say anyone who's advocating for UBI, ask the question of that person, what do you want me to sacrifice? What do you want me to give up? And I want to close with this. As soon as I heard and saw on my television what was going on down in Texas and the mass expulsion of the immigrants, Haitian immigrants there, I immediately started writing letters, structuring letters to my president, to my vice president, to my state senator, Rubio and Scott. Scott's the only one I've heard from, to the members of this delegation, Lois Frankel, Wasserman Schwartz, Ted Dortch, all of them. I have structured letters to them, called them, emailed them, tweeted them, asking them to get on board and bring a stop to this nonsense. We haven't seen anything like this since 1992, when the Coast Guard stopped the Haitian immigrants coming here from over at sea. We were able to manage to bring in people from the Muriel boat lift, and they're going to say it's about economics and fleeing economics. No, it's political. There's violence in the streets, an attempted overthrow of their government that had its foundation right here on our soil. And we need to stop this nonsense about turning away the Haitian people and treat them more humanely. When I saw these people swinging their what appeared to be whips while riding on horseback, that brought back memories, historic memories of the white overseer standing over the black slaves in the fields. That is not an image that we want to portray across this nation, across this world, of how the United States treats its people. So I immediately wrote my president. I immediately wrote the Secretary Moyotis. I immediately wrote our vice president. And I'm going to write my friend, my cousin, who is a United Nations ambassador, and ask her if she can't stand in and do something about this nonsense. We need to stop it. We're able to bring in the Cuban people in the Muriel boat lift. They they created their little situations under the bridges down in Miami. We were able to support them and bring them in. Why can't we do the same for the Haitian people? And I'm going to close with that.
All right. Thank you so much. And Reverend Dowling, go ahead, sir.
Whew. Well, you know, I'm not going to, you guys have listened ad nauseum to us. And you have a awesome responsibility as a paper in front of you. And so I am not going to bloviate on what I've already talked about. I hope that you do your research on me. I've had the opportunity to follow this race in your paper. Been a little bit concerned because it seemed as if your paper, my paper, because I'm a subscriber, had a little bit of a narrative that it was hoping to shape. I hope that's not the case. It is my hope that this process is going to be fair. And every indication you have given me through these questions is that it is. And so I want to thank you for that. And let me just say that, you know, I am who I am. What you see in this interview and what you see on the other candidates' forums, what you see in my writings, that is Elvin Dowling. I try to be thoughtful. I try my best to be kind. I try not to call names. And I most certainly try to be truthful. And so I will say to you is that what you will have in me is a member of Congress who will be accessible to you, who will always answer your calls to as great an extent possible, who will always answer your questions, who will try to be timely, who will try to be relevant, who will try to do what's best for the people of this district. So that's me. You know, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to wake up every single day and fight on behalf of people. I believe that if you make the right decision and if you endorse the right person, then this race is anybody's to win or lose. And so you got an awesome responsibility. I thank you for the opportunity to be considered.
I thank you as well. God bless.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks to all three of you for being here today. Appreciate the time. Best of luck to you. And thanks a lot for your questionnaires and for your participation. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.